All right, welcome to our really a mini lecture on how to, with tips and tricks and things like that, write FRQs for AP Psychology. All right, I'm Chris Gall, and of course I'll be your host for the lecture today. So a few things worth knowing about the exam, or at least the FRQ portion of the exam. Right, you get 50 minutes to write 2 FRQs, and this is a single window, with the suggestion that you move on after 25 minutes, but not a requirement that you do so, which means that you can spend 26 or 27 or 30 minutes on one question if you want to, as long as you recognize that that time comes out of the time you'll spend answering the other question. Okay. Each question is going to be worth 7 points on your raw score. And one of the things you got to know about AP exams is that they do a raw score and then they scale it to give you the 1 to 5. That's what they actually put on that report that they send out to you and send out to colleges and things like that. Okay, so both of the questions are going to be worth the same amount. They're both worth 7 points, and the FRQs are worth 1/3 of your overall score in terms of weighting. Each question of these 2 questions is going to cover multiple units. So that could be as few as 2 units. It could be as many as 5 or 6, right? But they're each going to cover multiple units. One is going to talk about research methodology plus other units. So it's going to make sure that you understand that research piece of things. And the other one is some kind of a unique scenario that you're going to need to apply your knowledge to. In terms of writing, it is worth knowing that spelling and grammar do not count against you unless the reader can't understand what you're saying. Okay? If the reader can't understand what you're saying, that's a problem. It's the same thing with handwriting. Okay? In general, you want to have good handwriting, you want to have good spelling and good grammar, but at the end of the day, don't fixate on those things. Okay, don't fixate on those things. Typically speaking, they can find somebody who can read what you wrote. So first things first, this is not a test of whether you can write long or whether you can write a traditional essay. So it's not about can I write 5 or 6 or 7 pages, and it's not about can I write introductions, conclusions, transitions, and things like that. It is helpful if you do separate paragraphs for each of the words or each of the terms or the ideas or the concepts or the people that they're asking you about, but that's really a courtesy to the reader. Okay, and it is one of those things where it's not, they don't dock you for doing an individual paragraph, but it is significantly harder for the reader to score and to follow. Okay. And when you're writing, do make sure that you don't simply define terms. That's not enough unless you're explicitly asked for a definition. Always assume that you need to apply what you're writing. Okay. This is also a test of you being able to write clearly and succinctly. Succinctly means you should say enough, but not too much. That means you don't need to worry about dressing it up with extra length or fancy terminology. Say what you mean what you say. Okay? It's not about knowing the best synonym or using the biggest words. So don't write for the sake of writing. Okay? But do make sure to be an AP student, and that means you need to address the prompt. That both means providing the definitions and the applications that you're asked for, but it also means making sure that those applications apply to the prompt you're writing about. Okay. So if they're asking you about driving, make sure that you talk about driving as part of your application. Right? Keep your focus narrow to what they're actually asking you about. Some other just kind of general writing tips and techniques. Define the terms given in the prompt and then apply those terms as used in the prompt. Okay, If the STEM talks about what someone is remembering, your definition and application needs to talk about memory. Or if you are asked about a theorist in the memory unit, and and it has to do with their studies around memory, but they also studied, I don't know, brain anatomy, you need to talk about memory because that's what's in the prompt. Address the prompt. Okay. Your definitions should be at least one sentence long, and they should be clear and to the point. Okay. Don't be circular. Don't be circular. You cannot use a word to define itself. That's what circular means. Okay. That means you need to know synonyms for the word so that you can use those as part of your definition. And then your applications should be a little bit longer. Those should be at least 2 sentences, maybe as many as 5. Okay. And specific to the prompt itself. Specific to the prompt itself. So it's not enough to just give a generic definition, but you also need to do the application piece. And I know I sound like a broken record, but that's because, at least in my classroom, where kids tend to get caught up, they don't necessarily do the application piece. Some other tips and tricks, and a lot of this stuff is just courtesy for the reader. Okay. It is really nice for the reader if you use white space, and that means that you're leaving empty lines between parts of the question, and also that you're labeling the parts of the question. It's just another step. The reader can't give you points if they're not 100%, if they're not sure which part of the question you're answering. Okay. Use your good handwriting. Most of you will quite potentially be writing these out longhand. Okay. Use your good handwriting. And that's a courtesy to the reader, again, right? Readers do get told to score the first one on the first day the same as they score the last one on the last day. But by day 3 or 4, you're just tired because you've read the same thing probably 500 times, right? So having good handwriting, leaving white space, things like that, right? Labeling parts, that's just helpful to the reader. It takes less cognitive load for them then to score your paper, right? They can't take off points for that, but it makes it a lot easier for them to give you points, which is what they want to do. Do go ahead, write your answer in the order the terms are provided, which again, also a courtesy to the reader. But it's important for you because if they're written out of order and it's not clear which part of the prompt you're addressing, they may not give you points for what you say. Okay. So if you're not labeling, but you are going in order, they can reasonably assume which part of the prompt you're answering. But if they're not sure, they can't give you a score. Be specific in your definition. Okay. Apply the terms back to the FRQ example. So in other words, talk about the situation they give you. Don't make up your own situation. Use synonyms in your definitions, not the words themselves. Be to the point. Be straightforward. Okay. When you're writing these things, write them in ink. Write them in ink. If you're writing in an exam booklet in particular, right, those get packaged up at the school and sent to Princeton, New Jersey, and they get sent into a sorting factory where they get sorted out and put into folders and shipped to, I think the AP Psych reading is in Miami, Florida, right? And then they get moved around in a big convention center. And so if you're writing in pencil, the pencil will tend to rub off and it's hard to read. Okay. Write in pen, it makes it way easier. And they do ask dark blue or black ink is what they ask you to write in. Okay, again, way easier to read. Technically, they'll score it if you write it in something else, but they're going to frown at you. And you want to make it easy for them to give you points, not hard. All right, so that's our lecture talking about FRQs, our mini lecture really, for the optional day today on February 10th, and I will see you next week.